Good afternoon. My name is Danny. It is April 5th, 2026. It's Easter. I had to look to make sure. Today's Easter. I don't do Easter, so I wasn't sure. Before I start, I want to say I do long form video. I don't edit and I don't prepare. I just let the Lord give me the words. So I've been asked several times to give my testimony. And I was kind of putting it off because, it's who's going to want to hear it? You know what I mean? But I realize it's not supposed to be about me. It's about the Lord. It's about Yeshua and about Jehovah. And so I decided to go ahead and do it. You may hear some noises. I have 3 cats. One of them's a kitten. And she's very rambunctious, so we may get interrupted. If you hear crashing in the background, she also likes to knock things over and attack the other cats, so we'll try to ignore it. First of all, I was a kid in the 1970s. I was a teenager in the 1980s. Yes, before technology, before computers and cell phones and all that stuff. And it really was as great as we keep telling you it was. It was a wonderful time. And unless you have experienced the life that was before computers and social media and cell phones, it's really hard to put into words how great it was. You didn't want to be home. If you wanted to get out of the house, you had to actually call on the phone attached to the house. Yes, I know you've heard it all. And actually talk to someone. And you would be on the phone for hours. And then you would be like, hey, let's go do something. Let's go see a movie. Let's rent a movie and I'll come over to your house. Let's go out to eat. Let's do something. It was awesome. You couldn't just pick up your phone and say, hey, what up? And there's no connectivity there. There's nothing personal there. It was wonderful. And yes, we really did run the streets. Our parents had no idea where we were. No idea. I was 8, 9 years old, and my mom had no clue where I was. And I usually didn't know. I usually didn't know where I was. I would just pick a direction. I knew, and I've lived in some pretty big cities. We've lived in a couple different states. We've lived in some fairly large cities. And, we were smart, though. We knew how to get home. We knew how to ask for directions if we couldn't figure out how to get home. And back then, it really was a village taking care of the children. I'll give you a prime example. If you got in trouble at school, the teacher would take you up front and whoop your butt in front of the class and then call your parents. And when you got home, you'd get your butt whooped again. And guess what? The neighbor down the street, you mouth off to them, they can smack you upside the head, and then your parents go take you home and whoop your butt. That's the way it was. I remember the last time I got my butt whooped in school, I was 19 years old. 19. And I got spots. Actually, I got them more than once that year. And to be honest, I did not deserve those. That was in a Christian school, and I did not deserve those whoopings. They were over dumb things. It was unnecessary, but it is what it is. But my point is, back then, there was human connectivity. There was excitement. There was fear, Again, we didn't know where we were half the time. You turn down the wrong street, you're like, oh, this looks kind of shady. And you know, but the fear was exciting, and the human connectivity was exciting. And yes, even the rebellion was a real thing. I was, oh boy, wait till I'll tell you about it here in a little bit. I was a tyrant to my mom. So anyways, we grew up poor, very poor. Like, not just poor, we grew up, and some of you will understand this. We grew up, hey, the heat got shut off, so we're going to sleep on the kitchen floor with a sheet over the door and the oven open pour. And I know some of you understand exactly what I'm talking about. We grew up a kerosene heater in the middle of the living room pour, or wrapped up in blankets with a hair dryer under the blanket to keep us warm pour. I grew up, I got all of my clothes as hand-me-downs from someone who was 10 years older than me pour. I grew up, eventually I'm going to have to get some shoes that actually fit me and don't have holes because I've outgrown them poor. I know some of you understand, but that's the way it was. My mom was a single mom, and she was the breadwinner, and things were different back then. It's not like it is now. And I understand that things are tough now, but at the same time, there are so many more avenues for parents now than there were back then. It was a different life. It was different because we couldn't complain. We couldn't go on social media and make somebody look bad or make a company look bad so that they had to take action. You just took what you got. That's the way it worked. So, and for everything that I just said, I wouldn't have, I would go back. I would go back. I hate, loathe, despise what the world has become now that we have continual social media and technology in our faces. I'm using it right now to do this. And if you didn't live in a time before this, then I can't properly put it into words because it's not words, it's experiences, it's feelings and emotions, and you want to talk about anxiety, but you did it. You just got out there and you did it. You didn't sit there and be like, oh, I have anxiety. You did what you had to do. You put on your big girl pants and you marched on. And let me tell you, I have been in so many situations because of the poor choices I made where I should have died 1,000 times. And praise Jehovah, praise his name, that I did not end up in worse situations. He really watched out for me. So that's kind of my background. I am the oldest of 4. I'm the firstborn. And I have 4 kids. I have some grandkids. My kids are grown and out of the house. So, okay, so back to, let's go to the 70s. I was a kid in the 70s again and a teenager in the 80s. And my mom said that I was the perfect child. I got straight A's. I always tested as gifted. I was always put into advanced classes whenever they could. We moved around a lot. And so, some schools had those kinds of classes, and other schools, maybe they didn't have the classes, so they would pull me, let's say if I tested out advanced at reading, they would take me out of class and put me in a couple grades above me during their English class, or you get the idea. My mom said I was the perfect child until I hit puberty and I hit my teen years. Now, again, things were a lot different back in the 80s. As a typical teen, I mean, prime example, they had smoking areas in high schools. I mean, that's the way it was back then. And smoking was the rebellious thing to do, you know, underage drinking, driving a car before you were supposed to. That's the kind of stuff we did. We weren't on computers. We weren't on cell phones. We were out with our friends causing trouble and getting in trouble. And I was always getting in trouble. Yes, I did the drinking and the smoking pot and skipping school. And I was running away. Not because of my home life, just because I would get a burr up my butt and be like, I'm going to go. And I think the last straw was when we lived in Indiana. It was my 15th birthday, and they're like, what do you want to do? And someone said, let's go to California. Ha ha ha. I said, let's do it. Again, this is before computers and cell phones. We drove to California from Indiana. We ran away. We went down into Mexico. We came back up. We were going to go to Florida, but we needed money. And someone said, hey, I know somebody in Arizona. They said they'll give us some money, a relative. So we went to Arizona on our way to Florida. My mom, and by the way, we got busted in Arizona. We got caught. I don't even know how that happened. I walked up and the cops were talking to my friends because I had walked down the street or something. I don't remember. And the cops are there, and I'm like, oh, man. Got put into juvie. Just one of many times I was in juvie. And my mom had no idea where I was. How could she? There's no social media. There are no... I mean, the computers started coming out in the 80s, but it wasn't... in everybody's home thing. They were just starting to come out, and you had to have a little money to have a computer. I mean, that was high status stuff back then. And we were not high status. And she had no idea, and I think that was the last straw. And back then, group homes, girls' homes, boot camps were kind of all the rage. And she started going to this church, and this church supported putting girls into a particular Christian girls' home. And they convinced her to put me there. And she was afraid. She was afraid for my safety. I mean, I was running away. I was going into other countries. Oh, by the way, I was 15. I had just turned 15, the week of my 15th birthday. And she was scared. So right before my 16th birthday, she had me put into this girl's home. And just to give you an idea of how whacked out I was at the time. I showed up at this girl's home. I had a blue jean jacket on because they were all the rage. And on the back, I had hand-drawn, like, flames and spider webs and an upside-down cross and, you know, ice. And I had stripes shaved into my head and on one side and a little longer, because back then, the 80s, it was all about asymmetrical hair and big hair. But if you were, you know, exploring your grunge punk, then yeah, you had stripes in your hair. But not too many of us did. But I did the big hair, I did the short hair, I did it all. And so I was in this girl's home. And it was a Baptist, an independent, fundamental Baptist girl's home. And it was dreadful. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I will tell you a few things. I was there for over 2 years, a little over 2 years. Probably about 2 years and 3 months, 4 months, somewhere in there. A little bit before my 16th birthday until a couple months after my 18th birthday. And imagine living in a house, because that's what it was. There was a giant house. The family that ran it lived upstairs, and we had a walkout basement that we lived in. And the dorm held 30 girls. And if you were only allowed to talk to certain people. You had to earn the right. And that doesn't mean even if you were perfect that you could talk to everyone. You had a certain list of people you were allowed to talk to. And if you weren't, and it started out small, you know, you might only be able to talk to 3, 4, 5 people out of 30. And sometimes you got in trouble, you weren't allowed to talk to anyone. And if you're not allowed to talk to anyone, or talk to someone, you couldn't even make eye contact with them. Imagine living in a house for 2 years with family members, and you're not allowed to talk to them, and you're not even allowed to look in their direction. Like if they walk past you, you gotta turn your head for 2 years. And if you got into enough trouble, you would get SWATs, because again, back then, that's the way the world worked. But the way they did it is they would have you lay down, face down, put a chair on you over your back. You'd have to lay down, face down like this. They put a chair on your back, have somebody sit in it, and then just wail on you. And I had it happen once, and I didn't even do anything. They said that it was because they didn't like my countenance. That's why they did it. Apparently I had a scowl or something. I don't even know on my face. They just said they didn't like my countenance. And their motto was to break the spirit. Breaking the spirit brings compliance. And so they wailed on me. Now, in this home, and the only reason I'm bringing it up, because I need you to understand, I'm over here. We didn't go to church. Every so often, you know, a bus person would come and invite me to church throughout my childhood. And I might ride that. And then in my teen years, every so often, a friend would say, hey, why don't you come to church with me? And there was this Pentecostal church where they speak in tongues, which freaked me out. And, you know, I would get saved every time I went because I didn't understand. You know, I'd get the feels and cry, and who wants to give their life to God? And I'd raise my hand every time. But as soon as I left, I didn't understand. Things were different back then. And that was the only introduction I don't even want to say introduction, that was all I knew about church. I'd ride the bus once in a while, and I went to this Pentecostal church a handful of times. So now I'm in this independent, fundamental Baptist church where the rules are the rules, and it's all about rules. You know, you have to look a certain way. You had to wear dresses down below your knees, and like this shirt would not be considered modest. It could only be 2 or 3 fingers under your, what is that, your clavicle? So this would not be considered unless you're going to sit here and do this all the time. Which normally I would wear a tank top under this anyways, but I was cleaning house and I wasn't planning on doing this. And you had to talk a certain way, and you couldn't do certain things like look at certain people. And it was, you memorized just an insane amount of Bible. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I had entire books of Bibles memorized. And if you missed more than 3 words, you couldn't talk to anyone for a week because you failed your scripture memory. And you'd have to wait a week and then do it again and miss less than 3 words in any given passage. And until you did that, you weren't allowed to talk to girls. Those were the rules. So in this home, that was my introduction to Christianity. Now, as awful as it was, and believe me, it was bad. A lot of people, a lot of girls came out of that place really messed up. Really messed up. I'm way over here, okay? I can't show you. And then I go all the way over here. I'm in the world all the way to the extreme. I'm in religion all the way to the other extreme. And then when I finally do leave after 2 years and a couple months, I started going. I went to the church that supported me in this girl's home. I asked if I could come stay with the preacher and his wife, because I knew I'd go back. And instead of taking me in, he said yes. They said yes. But instead, they put me in the home of a church member, a family from the church. And they were absolutely lovely people, but I didn't know them. And they were so sweet, and I loved them, and I lost contact with them, to which to this day I really regret that, okay? So now, this girls' home was so extreme, I'm going to an independent fundamental Baptist church, and because it was so extreme over here, this church still, you still got to wear the dresses, and you still got to look a certain way, act a certain way, and do certain things. But I'm like, oh my goodness, because it was so extreme over here, I'm like, oh, this church is going to hell. That's how extreme this place was, and why so many people came out of it just messed up, okay? So, I come from Egypt to the Promised Land, or to, I don't want to, that's a bad analogy, because it was not the Promised Land. It was a worldly version of the Promised Land. And then I'm thrown out into the world. So I went to my senior year, I went to the church's school. It was a very tiny school. There were like 19 people the year I was there in the whole school, from kindergarten to high school. And they had trailers out behind the church. Those were our classrooms. And then my preacher at the time convinced me to go to a very well-known Baptist college. And back then it was huge. It was one of the earliest and biggest mega churches, and it had a college and a very large bus ministry. And I went for 3 semesters, but I didn't want to go. That's the thing. I did not want to go. But he convinced me to do it anyways. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go off to college. I wanted to stay local. I wasn't ready. I knew I wasn't ready. I came from here, I went to there, and I was here. And I didn't understand anything, because I came from one extreme to the other, and I'm here. And I needed to learn how to be here. And I'm 19, and I'm a mess. But I went for 3 semesters and decided I needed to go figure out life. Because I came out of this extreme, I was kind of messed up too. It's so extreme. And I had never experienced anything like that. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And back then, you couldn't just look up things. There was no one to talk to. And so, I was kind of messed up too for a long time. But anyways, I went to this college for 3 semesters, and I decided I needed to get out and figure things out. And so I left, because I didn't want to be there in the first place. First of all, the only things that college at that time had to offer was to be a preacher's wife, a missionary, a Christian school teacher. They didn't have like just general, it was specifically for Christian. You get the idea. You could be a missionary, you could be a preacher's wife, you could be a Christian school teacher, you could be a secretary in the church. It wasn't, those weren't things I was interested. Actually, I wanted to be a lawyer back then. I'm glad I didn't. And so it wasn't for me. I think he thought that if I went, I would find a good man, get married, settle down. I didn't want to be a preacher's wife. You know, I knew that I would mess that up. And so anyways, I left and I went back to live with my mother because I had no money and didn't know what I was doing. I lived with her, got a job, got my own place, and then I just made a mess of my life. Made a mess of it. And I got into some relationships that were not good. I was, doing things that I should not, a lot of things, smoking pot and drinking, and I bartended for a while, and I had a slew of different jobs, and mostly I was a waitress or worked in bars. But I got into some relationships that weren't good, and I ended up with 4 kids that I love dearly, and I just made a mess. I made a mess, and I got away from the Lord, and fortunately the Lord is good. I have been with my husband now for 20 years. And it's just been the last several years. I looked for a long time for a church. I wanted a church. And I didn't want to go back to my old church. I didn't feel that I was welcome there. And also, it's like a 45-minute drive. And I knew I did not want to go back to the... I didn't know what was wrong with it. I just knew that something was wrong with the Baptist doctrine. And I started trying other churches. I went to the non-denominational churches. I was looking so hard it's just been within the last 10 years, maybe 7, 8 years, that I was really, really wanting to, the Lord was giving me eyes to see and ears to hear, especially when the whole COVID fiasco happened. And I was like, oh, something spiritual is going on. And so I was really, really looking. I was calling churches and interviewing them over the phone. I was going in and doing personal interviews. I was looking into different doctrines, the modern spiritualism, the Pentecostal, and the speaking in tongues, and the non-denominational. And I went to a couple churches locally, and they were perfectly fine. They were perfectly sound. But I realized that I could go to any church in anywhere USA, and I'm going to get exactly the same thing. It seemed like every church I was going to was exactly the same. I was going to get the exact same thing with maybe a tweak here and there. Not all of them spoke in tongues. I didn't go to those churches. I just was looking into them. I was interviewing them because I didn't know. I was reading I was reading the Word, and then I was trying to find a church based on what the Word said. And I knew that those churches, something was off. Something was off with every single church that I went to. I didn't know what it was. And, I was praying, Lord, if this is a church, show me. If this is a church, show me. Give me another church to call. Give me a church to go to this week. And finally, because I was getting really frustrated, I said, you know what? Let me get specific. And I've said it in the past. He wants us to be specific. When I prayed for my husband, he gave me exactly what I was looking for. Everything that I asked for, he gave me. Because I sat down one night and I said, Lord, I can't do this. I'm, and this is before I was even really serving him or trying to serve him. I just broke down one night. I was a single mom and I just hit bottom. And I said, Lord, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm struggling. And I'm just sobbing to the Lord. I told him, I said, I'm trying so hard to be strong, and I'm done. I'm over being strong. I can't do this. I need a helpmeet, and this is what I need. And I went down a list of things that I thought I needed. And it was like 2 weeks later, I met my husband. And I know that was of the Lord. So I sat down one night, and again, I'm sobbing. And it wasn't the first time. I was like, Jehovah, I'm trying my best to find a church so that I can get my heart right, so that I can understand what it is that you want from me. And I told him, I said, you know what? I've gone to all these churches. I've called all these churches. I've interviewed all these people. I said, whatever. And I tried to stop and think. I said, whatever that New Testament church is, when Yeshua died and the disciples were creating those churches and getting those churches together, and that church that they were up in the upper room and the Holy Spirit came upon them. That's right. That's what church is supposed to be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now. That's the way it was meant to be. Whatever Paul and Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of them, whatever it is they had, that's what I want. That's what I want. And I'm like, those don't exist anymore. How is he going to give me that? Do we really question Jehovah? I'm like, there's no New Testament churches. And I've called pretty much every church in my area. I said, whatever that is, Father, I want as close to that as I can get, because that's what Yeshua had. That's what the disciples had when Yeshua died. That's what I want. That all these churches that I'm reading about in the New Testament, that's the way it's supposed to be. So whatever that is, I didn't know what was wrong with these other churches. Remember that. I just knew it wasn't right. And I didn't know what was right about the New Testament church. But I knew that's how it's supposed to be. But I didn't think those kinds of churches existed. Or if they did, they were some kind of hippie, yuppie church, And I tell you, I want to say it was, I don't know, a couple weeks later. He, in a way that only he could do, that way I would know that it was him. My youngest daughter was taking driving class. Now my youngest daughter she's married, moved out, she's in college. But she was taking driving lessons. And normally my husband, her dad, would drive her to her lesson. But for some reason that day, I think he was trying to get something accomplished or something. I'm like, well, I'll take her. So I took her, and I had an hour to waste. But I didn't know what to do with my hour. I didn't really have anything planned. And so I'm looking around, and I look a couple doors down. And you have to understand, a few years ago, about 10, I started getting sick. And then back in 2020, I got really sick. I had a wonderful little mom-pop shop, cutest little furniture store you ever saw. And I got so sick, and I had to close it down. And I started going to all these doctor visits, and I got diagnosed with all these different things. And so, and I don't even remember why I brought that up. I know there was a point. Oh, because I looked down, a couple doors down, there was a vitamin and herb shop. And I'm like, oh, because I was all about the vitamins and herbs. Because the Lord was showing me, you know, take this, take that, take this, take that. And I spent almost 2 years sitting on the couch. I couldn't move. I literally sat here day after day. Not on this couch. We had a different couch back then. I sat here after I closed my shop day after day after day after day after day for a year and a half. And I was doing all this research, and you know, the Father was showing me how to heal myself using herbs and vitamins, and because I didn't want to take medications. I don't. And after a year and a half sitting here every day, just unable to walk to the bathroom because it hurt so bad, I started having good days. And then I'd have a few more good days. And so it was during this time that I took my daughter to her driving class. I looked down, and lo and behold, there just happened to be a vitamin and herb shop. I was like, oh, cool, I'll go down there. I've got an hour to waste. So I went down there. Okay, so not only am I all about the herbs and vitamins, and there just happens to be a store there, I go in, I look around, and I bought a couple things. You know, I was in there for a while. And as I'm walking out the door, I look over, and there's some literature on some Christian literature. And I made a point of turning around, because we had kind of talked a little bit, you know. So I turned around, and I went back to the register, and I told him, because I knew that was the owner, because we had talked a little bit. And I said, I just want you to know, it's refreshing to see Christian literature in here, because usually I come into these stores and it's all about the crystals and the spiritual aspect. I said, you never see Christian literature in them. It's always the mystic stuff. And I asked him, I said, where do you go to church? And sure enough, he used to go to my old church. I was like, oh, see, I'm getting goosebumps just telling the story. I love this story. I love this story. It's such a good one. This is how I know that I am on the right path, that this was of the Lord, that it is exactly what I prayed for. And this is my favorite part of the story. And so he told me that he used to go to my old church, and he went there for like 30 some years. I hadn't been there in like 30 some, you know, I went a couple of times for special occasions, but I don't remember seeing him. I didn't know who he was, but we knew the same people. I have family members that still go to that church. And so we knew a lot of the same people. And he came from my same spiritual background and my same spiritual church. I'm like, oh my goodness. So he invited me to the church that he goes to now. And I didn't go right away. First of all, I was still in a lot of pain. I was still trying to get over all the things that I was being diagnosed with without going on pharmaceuticals. But I think it was probably a month and a half later, I did finally go, because I started taking her to her driving classes, and I would go in there and talk to him, and he kept inviting me, and so I finally did. And oh my goodness, praise you, Jehovah, praise you, Father. It was a New Testament church. Now tell me that's not of the Lord. Oh, I got goosebumps. I have goosebumps. I love the story. I love when you know that it is Jehovah. And so many times over the years, I'm just like, I know that was you. I know that was you. A lot of times, it's something funny, because he has a sense of humor. He's the one who gave us humor, so of course he has a sense of humor. But it is a New Testament church. We keep Torah, and I highly recommend, highly, please, go through my videos and find the one that says, why do I keep Torah? It is just me reading his word. It's just me reading his word. All the verses that say, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. The word for commandments it actually means instructions, and the word is the word used for Torah. We keep Torah, because he tells us to. And it's not just the Old Testament. There are several verses that I included in there from the New Testament. As a matter of fact, the one that says, Yeshua himself said, if you say you love me and you do not keep my Torah, you are a liar. Yeshua, Jesus said that. It's red letter. Red letter, folks. If you love me and you don't keep my commandments, you're a liar. That's what it says. Go look it up. Go watch the video, please. And I gotta tell you, it was so foreign from everything that I'd ever been taught. So foreign. You know, because in the Baptist community, you're taught that the Old Testament was nailed to the cross. So we don't have to keep it. It doesn't count. You get nice, happy stories from the Old Testament, but it doesn't count. But we keep his commandments, just not the ones in the Old Testament. Okay, so which ones are you keeping? The ones we pick and choose about looking a certain way and acting a certain way and saying certain things. And, you know, we get people to say a prayer but never see them in church. Those commandments, except those are not his instructions. He doesn't say go out and have people say a prayer. He says go and make disciples of my people. Go make disciples. And that's in the Torah. Actually, that's red letter too. But we are to go make disciples, not say a prayer. That's just one of many things that I learned that we got wrong. And you know, when you learn these things, you go through a mourning process. It's almost like going through a death. It's a spiritual death, kind of, to the old you and the old teachings. Once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it, and you're saddened because all these years I believed this way. First of all, again, I came from a home where we didn't read Bible, we didn't go to church, except for maybe holidays, maybe, and usually not even then. You know, if they came and knocked on the door, you could ride the church bus. But as long as we said a prayer, we were good. To this extreme over here, and now you go through a mourning, but it's an exciting mourning when you realize that you're a sinner and that you are on your way to hell, and you have an introduction to Yeshua, who died for our sins, yes. And again, I would not change anything. If I had to go back to that girl's home, I would. Because I know if I had not gone to that girl's home, I would not believe in God. I was in the process of convincing myself that I was too smart to believe in God. I needed to go there, as awful as it was, because it did show me that God exists and that Yeshua died for my sins, and I would do it again and again and again. Before I would go through a life not knowing Him. But now you go through a morning because you're like, how did we get this so wrong? It was never supposed to be just the Old Testament. It was never meant to be just the New Testament. They go together. The one is a fulfillment. It is a completion. I came not to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. It goes together. It's a continuance. The New Testament is a continuance to the Old Testament. The Brit Hadashah does not negate the rest of the Bible. Did I use that word right? I'm getting a little tired because it's been 47 minutes. And I'm going to wrap up. But the excitement, I have never, in all those years of going to different churches, going from public school to the private Christian school in high school, and going to Bible college, and going to this church, and going to that church, I have never understood His Word as well as I do now. I have never felt as complete as I do now. I have never felt closer to Him. And I don't mean in a, I'm having a feeling closeness. I mean, He lays it all out. And I understand it. There is a peace and there is a freedom that comes with knowing those boundaries, the Torah. He gave us certain rules. And they're not even rules, they're instructions. And they're meant to keep us on a path that allows us to have fellowship with Him. That's all it is. It's just so that we can have fellowship with Him. He's like, okay, you guys keep messing up. Just do this. Just do the Torah. And we're good. We're good. You have to have the Torah. And then Yeshua came and He completed it. Now you don't have to do the sacrifices, but you still have to keep the Torah and believe that He fulfilled the Torah. He was that final sacrifice. He kept my Torah His entire life, and He died unfairly. And we didn't kill Him. So, if you want to be like, oh, this person, this set of people killed the Messiah, or this set of people killed the Messiah. No, they didn't. They tortured Him. They beat Him. He laid down His life. They didn't kill Him. He laid down His life. You can't kill something that's perfect. And God, He gave up His life willingly for you. If you were the only person on the planet, He would have done it. And for me, and there's nothing more fulfilling than the simplicity that comes with understanding that. Do we keep Torah to be saved? No. We believe that Yeshua was the sacrifice, that he kept Torah his entire life, never once wavering, never once doing anything wrong, and laid down his life willingly. Remember, death is the penalty for sin. He never sinned. Therefore, death was not a penalty to him. It was our penalty. And he willingly paid it. He gave up his life to be that sacrifice. You can't kill perfection. He can only give it up willingly. And the freedom and the absolute brain explosion that comes with that realization is so comforting. Oh, I gotta sneeze. I found my church. I found the truth. I had my prayers answered in a way that only Jehovah could have done, so that I would know that it was him. If it had been someone else and not somebody who came from my old church and knew all the people that I knew. Yeah, I knew my old preacher since I was 15. He just passed away a couple weeks ago. I knew him since I was 15. I've known him for decades. And I would talk to him, every so often. Like I said, I still have family members that go there, and I have been there here and there over the years for special occasions and stuff. And so, we would catch up. But if it had been anyone else, I probably never would have gone to my church. And I've been going there for, this month will be 4 years. 4 years. And I have never felt so fulfilled. And I have never understood his word the way I do now. And I'm going to end here. I want to highly recommend that you go watch the video that says Why I Keep Torah. It's all the verses, all of them, all the verses. I read them. It says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Keep my commandments. And it's not just Old Testament, it's New Testament. Yeshua said it. Keep my Torah. If you love me, keep my Torah. If you say you love me and you don't keep my Torah, you're a liar. Not my words. Those are Yeshua's, Jesus' words. He said it, not me. Go read, please, please. I am begging you. I'm praying, Yehovah. Whoever is questioning this, please give them what they need. Open their eyes, and eyes to see, ears to hear. Please help them to see. In Yeshua's name. And I say in Yeshua's name because I know it's his will. I know it lines up with Bible. All right, I love you. Yehovah loves you. And Yeshua loves you so much that he willingly kept the Torah, every jot and tittle. That's biblical. And laid down his life. And if you had been the only person on the planet, he would have still done it. All right. Have a good day.